I have just bought this home from where I bought it, and I haven't even looked at it all that well. I looked at it quickly at the gentleman's place, and it's all in one piece. It's in a terrible state. This is a Stromberg Carlson record player. I don't know anything about it yet, so we'll have a look inside. Oh, the first thing I notice is the little stay there's broken. There's the record player. Looks pretty old. It's fully automatic though. That's unusual. And that's the record size selector. You have to do that manually, I guess, to push it against the record. It does have. It's got a cartridge in it. I doubt very much it'll work, but it's a mono. There's only 2 wires, so it's a mono set. My wife finds all these radios for me on Marketplace and then sends me a link. She thought this would be a good candidate for a video, so I went and looked at it, and it has all the knobs, and it has a good... Hello, where's the knob? There it is. Okay, it does have all the knobs. The faceplate's good. The record player's in pretty good condition, so I thought, well, we can try and restore this. Now, when I saw this on Marketplace in the ad, I thought someone's added this. It's got to be homemade, and it looks like it there, but I'm not 100% sure. Now, the inside of the lid's got a spray-on felt finish. I'll try and retain that if I can. It looks in pretty good condition. The veneer's just peeling off everywhere. So this is going to need completely redoing. This is the only identification I can find so far, and it's just the voltage and a serial number, so no model number. So I'll just take this cover off and have a look inside. Not much. There it is. It's just a normal radio slung sideways. And I can see a problem already. There's the output transformer just lying in there. So I'd say that's had it. To get to the back of the radio, I'll have to turn this over and take the bottom off. So it's just a masonite base with some screws left. This has seen a lot of service because none of these screws are gripping anymore. They're just sitting there. So just give me a second, I'll get them out. I'm just looking at this and I can't see a model number anywhere on the back. The record player's got a model number on it, but I can't read it. It's only half there. It's an N0 or 6 or something. There's an inspection sticker here on the back of the turntable, but it's got really nothing written on it. It hasn't got a date, or if it has, it's not there anymore. And it tells you the type of cartridge it uses. Not sure what the point of that is underneath, but anyway. Now the valves are facing out and read the numbers. So that's a 6BE6. This one's a 6BA6. That's a 6AV6. This is a 6AQ5, which I think was the later version of the 6V6. The 6V6 was an octal base. This is a 7-pin. And the rectifier looks like a 6X4. Yeah, there it is there. So a bit later on I'll go and put those numbers into Radio Museum and see if I can come up with a Stromberg Carlson chassis that's the same as this one. Maybe I'll get lucky. Doesn't matter if we don't. We can work without a schematic. Here's the speaker. It's only a 5-inch speaker. You've got a giant case like this and a 5-inch speaker. Still, there's not a lot of room after the record player goes in, I suppose. I was going to say the cone looks alright, but I can see there's light through it. If I cover up the end there, you can see the light coming in and out. There's 2 screws on the side here that are holding the chassis in. I'll undo those, cut the wires for the speaker, and I'll pull this out and have a look. Okay, I've got it on the bench now, and just looking at the chassis, it's absolutely spotless. I thought this may have been sitting out sort of on a veranda or something and just got the sun and all the weather looking at the veneer on the outside, but the inside of it's clean as. It's very good. Got a slightly unusual mounted capacitor here, tuning capacitor. It's vertical. I think I have seen those before in Stromberg Carlson radios. Transformer, all looks really good. I'll just flip it over. Now have a proper look at this inside, but just have a look at this. There's the 2 wires, mains power wires coming in, and they've just twisted them together and then put some tape around it. These are lethal voltages and people are doing that. So looking inside, looks pretty neat in there. I don't know if these have been replaced, they may have. Yeah, they might have too, I think. Somebody's changed them at some point. That doesn't look like the original solder. A lot of these Stromberg Carlsons had a name as well, so a name and a model number, but there's nothing. There's the serial number, that's all. Alright, well, we'll get this inside and have a look at it. I'll just pull this speaker out. I can see lots of holes through it now the radio's out. I don't think it's going to be much good. Yeah, okay. That's been eaten alive, that thing. I could save it. I'll see if I've got something that I can replace it with. I think it's 3.5 ohms, so we can probably find a 4 ohm speaker. There's a date here. Hang on. So there's a date here as well, 29th of November 1961. So that's probably where I would have thought this record player came from. About, I would have thought late 50s, so 61's a bit surprising. It looks a bit earlier than that. The videos I produce wouldn't be possible if I didn't have a team of dedicated eggheads behind me.
The Earth rotates at about 1,000 miles an hour at the equator. E equals mc squared.
High five.
I want all those waxies out of there, Pa. Don't forget the electros, Pa.
I want these bells yet, Pa.
Boy, those kids are sure pushy, but I better do what they say. Before I do, I'm going to put some power on this thing and see how it works. I tested the output transformer they had sitting in the box there, and it's open circuit on the primary, and the speaker's of course got holes in it, but I've got a spare speaker here, so I've wired that up through a universal output transformer and selected the best ratio for the speaker. So that's connected up and ready to go. Because the primary's open, this 6AQ5 valve here, the output valve, may be damaged, and I was going to put another one in there, and then I thought, no, let's see what it does. So we'll left the original one in there. Here's the output valve grid coupling capacitor here. And because the primary was open, I need to make sure that that's going to be working. I could just change it, but as I said, you're not going to learn anything just changing stuff before you check it. So I've connected a DMM to the output of that coupling capacitor, and we can measure and just make sure there's no DC sitting there. I should get about a -9, I think, if this is a successor valve to the 6V6. So that should be around 9 to 12, I think. I haven't looked that up yet, I will do. Here's the multimeter selected to DC, and we'll monitor that during the startup. As always, I've got an isolated power supply. I've got a variac here. I've set it to 237 volts. I've got it selected to dim bulb, so the bulb should protect me from any overcurrent if there's a short circuit. So I'll just turn that, make sure it's turned on. I think that's volume. So I'll put some power on, and the bulb's behaving perfectly. Bright, dim. Voltage comes up, the valves will start conducting, and that voltage will drop, and the globe should come on a bit brighter. That's just coming brighter now, voltage is dropping. So that's working fine. We've got the lights on the front of the radio here. That is way too low for this radio to work. I'll whack it up a bit. You're not going to get it. Alright, I'm going to wind this down. I'm not going to get enough voltage out of it. It's pulling a lot of watts too. It's a bit of a problem. So I'll put it on full power. I'll take it up and just watch the wattage. 32 watts. Should start working. There it is.
After it. What this guy? This bat has bitten me.
Tone.
OBA.
Let's go back to a language.
And of course, I've been thinking a lot about that in this virus mode.
moment when almost the whole world is emerging from a similar catastrophe, and wondering what it might have learned from it, or whether there are positives amidst all the terrible losses.
Alright, well it's working fine. We've got -5.5 on the grid there, so the coupling capacitor is working to some degree. I don't know what it's supposed to be, so I'll have to look that up. I need to find a schematic if I can, or I probably won't get the right one, but it'll be something close to it using similar valves or the same valves. So I'm going to put this on, I'll put it on 230 odd volts. There you go. And I'll just measure the plate voltage. That's interesting. That went up to about 9 when I turned the voltage up, and now it's just dropping back. So you think that perhaps that capacitor is breaking down with the extra voltage on it. Now I've let this run for a little while. That voltage has now dropped to 3 volts, -3 volts. So that capacitor is definitely leaking. I'll just check the plate voltage while I'm here. And we got 158. That's probably dropping to, yeah, okay. So that should be more like 200, I would have thought. I'll go straight to the rectifier, and that's 190. Yeah, so as this is heating up, it's pulling more and more power out. The wattage is now up to 51 watts. This is way too much. So I'm going to shut it down. I need to change these capacitors. Something in there is doing that. It may be the rectifier valve, but I don't think so. 51 watts is crazy. So I'm going to shut it down and change some of those caps, I think. I'm just formulating a plan on the best way of doing this. I'm going to remove all these wax capacitors here, and I will change the electrodes. There's not a lot of hum, but I'll change them anyway because I've had these fail after the radio's been in service when I've left it in. So I'll change them now, save myself some trouble later on. Now some of this point-to-point wiring that they've got insulation sleeve over has come apart, or bugs have eaten it. So I'm going to have to lift one end of each of these wires and put some heat shrink on it or something, replace that. So leave it with me and I'll replace all this. We'll see what difference it makes to the power draw. When I come back, we'll plug it in. And we'll check our grid bias as well with this capacitor replaced. So give me a minute or two and I'll come back and it'll be all done. I've changed all the wax capacitors, and both the electro capacitors have been changed as well. I've also replaced the shielding on the wires where it had been eaten away by the little beasties. I'll reattach the probe to the output valve grid coupling capacitor there. We'll see what we get this time. Okay, I'll just power it up, and I've got it on dim bulb again. We've got 233 volts going into it. That's looking okay. I haven't got enough voltage. I'll wind it up a bit. It should make it go, 200 odd. I wonder if I've done something wrong there. It's not working. I go to full power. There didn't seem to be a short in it. What have I done? Well, it's not working. I've got the antenna on, haven't I? Yeah. Alright, it's not working. We've got 234. It's down to 35 watts, which is pretty good, 36 perhaps. And the grid voltage is down to minus 10, so that's good. That's come good. So everything's good, it just doesn't work. Well, here's the phono inputs. I'll see. Okay, so we're on phono. Oh, maybe it's a diggy switch. Yeah, so we're now on radio. But there's nothing there. I'm on, that's near full, that is full volume. Now I've done something wrong somewhere. I've got to track it down. Alright, I'll switch it off and have a bit of a think about this. Now I've checked all these capacitors. I went back and reviewed some of the earlier footage, and these are all exactly correct. I've just turned the radio around a bit so I can see it better. The camera angles aren't quite as good as they were, but I've connected an oscilloscope here onto the oscillator, and this is typical of an oscillator not working. There's sound there, but it's not tuning anything. So I've gone straight to the oscillator. I've got my oscilloscope on the oscillator there, and it's not doing anything. The oscillator's not working. Now, I didn't touch anything up in that area at all. Even the wires I recovered, I didn't undo them at that end. I undid it at this end, and there's nothing wrong there. So something's loose or not making contact. I can wobble the valve.
Well, where headlines are in your pocket, RN takes you further. We open the doors to ideas you don't find anywhere else.
To keep our kids out of the criminal justice system, we need to focus on whole life.
We don't believe any investing in thermal coal.
Okay, well that's weird, because I turned it over, ran it, and wiggled all the valves, and they were fine. So,
It's the difference between
okay.
knowing and understanding. RN, think bigger.
Ah, well, okay, well that was it. I thought I'd made a mistake, and I was wrong. I didn't make a mistake.
Queensland will impose a blanket ban on all Victorians entering the state amid the COVID-19 crisis. There is Emma Blackwood.
Yes, Victoria's got issues with the COVID coming back in the second wave, so they've banned them from coming to Queensland, or any other state actually. I think we already looked at it, but this is now running at about the same voltage. It's now dropped from about 50 watts to 37, and the output control grid is now running at -10, which I said should be about -9 to -12. So that's perfect. I think what I'll do is take all the valves out. I'm going to clean all the sockets up. I'll test the valves. If there's anything interesting, I'll come back and show you what I'm doing, but I did valve testing on the last radio. Don't need to do it again. So I'll flip it over and I'll do the valve sockets. Here's the socket that was giving me some grief there. I'm going to clean that out. What I use to clean the sockets is this Deoxit D5. It works pretty well. Here's the pins on the valve, and I'll just clean those up with a little tiny wire wheel I've got on my Dremel. So I'm going to use a dental pick here to get into these little ones. I polished all these pins with my little wire brush. Give another coat of the Deoxit. And just try and work it in a bit. Okay. I'll give it a go now. I haven't done anything else. I've just fixed that socket, put some power on. Now I've had to tune into the racing channel because all the 4 channels that I can get quite well are playing music. So I'll have to just listen to the races for a minute. I just want to wobble this around and see if we've fixed it or not.
Best back here, we're looking at numbers 1 and 8. Race number 6 coming up in 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chris.
So, perfect. Alright, that Deoxit's pretty good. As I said before, I'm going to clean the sockets on these valves, straighten the pins up on these big ones, and I will test the valves and just make sure they're okay. If any don't come up to scratch, I'll show you those ones. Otherwise, the ones that pass, I'm not going to bother, and I'll just tell you they're okay. I've cleaned all the sockets here, cleaned the pins on the valves, and I've tested all the valves, and they came up really well. They're all 80 or 90%, so they're perfectly good. So what I'm going to do now is I'll find a schematic for this thing, I'll flip it over and we'll check some voltages. There's an alignment to do, which I'll only do a very quick one because I don't think this will need much work at all. Now I've managed to find a circuit for this Stromberg Carlson. It's got the same valve layout here. The only difference is the rectifier is a 6x5 and mine's a 6x4. So a similar valve, different base is the only thing I think. Now, there's no voltages on here, so I thought I'll try and make my own voltages up and see how close I can get. The point being that if you don't have the voltages, you can probably guesstimate what they're going to be. So to start, here's the B plus coming out of the rectifier. It goes up here through a speaker transformer and into the plate. Now what I was going to do is set my variac to 240 volts. So there. It'll go through the transformer, it'll drop it 20 volts maybe, so I'll make that 220. Now the B plus goes through this 3K resistor here, goes up and powers the screen of the output valve. I would think that would be somewhere in the vicinity of 180 to 190 odd volts. Now that voltage is also applied to the plate of this 6AV6. It goes through a 22K resistor, so that's fairly big. You would think these run normally around about 80 volts, so if you've got 240 here, roughly about that. There's the grid, no idea what that's going to be, -2 maybe, may not be quite as low as that or as high as that, might be -1 or something. Now the voltage comes along here and is applied to the plate of the 6BA6 and also the plate of the 6BE6. Now it's going through the transformers, you're not going to get a lot of drop through there, so whatever that is, it's 180, 190, so I'll go a bit lower, we'll say 180 on that, and it'll be the same here. Now the two screens are coupled together here and they go through this 15k resistor to that supply line there, so that will drop that down to about 60 I would think, maybe give or take 10 on that, so 50 to 70. Now the grids on these two are just going to vary with the AGC. They can probably check and make sure they're negative, that's about all, so they'll be -1 to whatever. I'll just check and see what's coming out of the rectifier. I'm just connecting to the lead that's going to this transformer here, the output transformer, so that'll be B+. And we've got 244. So I'll just wind back the variac till I get it down to 240 odd. There you go. That one. Alright, that'll do. Close enough. Now the red wire coming back from the output transformer is the plate. I'll measure that. We've got 219. What did he say? 220. Okay. That was a good guess. Now here's the screen. I'll just put that on there. And 183. What did I say? 180 to 190. Okay. So far so good. And of course we know the grid's going to be -10 or so. There you go. Now the 6VA6 we said would be somewhere in the 80s. And what have we got? 80. Goodness me. Okay. This will be the grid for that one. Gosh. -0.7. I would have thought it was higher than that. That resistor there is doing the grid, so I'll check that again. I think I checked it. Just make sure that's within spec. We might get a bit more out of that. Okay, we'll move over to the 6BA6. This is the IF amplifier. And we can see the plate there. It's going off to the second IF transformer. And we said it should be 180. It's 183. So there's the screen that's running off to the other valve screen as well. So we don't measure that again. That's 60 and I said 60. Wow. Wow. This is the grid coming in. That'd be minus something, -0.6. That changes with AGC action. So that valve's okay. We know the screen on that's okay because we measured it on the other valve. And this is the plate going out of the mixer. And that should be about 183, which is exactly what it is on the other one. So, well, I'm amazed that we got so close to these voltages. Now these are fairly common voltages, and I kind of guessed what they'd be to start with, so probably not too surprising. The point is, with a bit of experience, you can come up with your voltages, and any of the old timers would know that. I'm only learning this, so this is a bit new to me. The only thing I wasn't sure about is this grid bias here. That's I got -2, but I don't really know what it should be. I'm going to look up the specifications and see if that's okay. I think it came out at -0.073 or something. I was a little worried about this 6AV6 grid voltage, but I've looked up the specifications and it says here for 100 volts on the plate, you should have -1 on the grid. We've got 80, and I think we had -0.7 something. So that's about correct actually, so I'm not going to worry about that. Time to do an alignment, and I don't expect this to be too far out at all. I've connected a 0.1 capacitor in the grid of the 6BE6, so that's going in where the aerial normally would go in. So we've bypassed the tuning capacitor. I've also connected my multimeter to the plate of the output valve, and that's via a 0.01 capacitor. I've got my signal generator set to 455, so we're good to go. And I've got the Western multimeter set up here, so we can read that there. All we're looking for there is maximum deflection. I'm not looking for a reading, and that's set on to AC. Now I'm running the speaker into a dummy load, so we can't hear it. That's just fine. Here's number 2. I'm going to start with that one. So that's about it there. Not getting any better than that. Now just come around to the top of the radio, and here's the top of number 2. So I'll just have a go at adjusting that. Okay, I've just adjusted my meter there to a higher setting, so it's moved a bit. This is the number 1, so just have a go at that. Not getting much out of that at all. That's right on the money, that one. And just the top of number 1 now. Got a little bit out of that one. All right. Now, as usual, I'll go back and do those 2 or 3 times again, and then I'll come back. I've done them all again twice, and they're perfect. So I'm going to move on to the next part, which is, of course, aligning the pointer with the dial. Now, I'm just going to check the alignment of the scale markings or the dial markings. Now, what I've found is that when they've manufactured this, they've covered all the adjustments with wax or a sealant. So if this is close enough, I'm not going to go trying to dig out sealant and waxes. Now I've used the dial to transfer the markings on this piece of masking tape. So that was 7ZL in Tassie, that's 600. That's the 3AK in Melbourne, that's 1500. And that's 3XY in Melbourne, and that's 1422. So there's the 3 major markings that we need to align it. So I've got the set warmed up, it's just coming up now. I'll turn the volume up. Yeah, there it is. So that's on 600. I'll just exactly tune it. A bit more there. Okay. So it's out by that much. I'll run up to 1500 and we'll try it there. I've changed the signal generator to 1500. I'll just turn it up a bit and see where we come in. And we're just a little bit short. So what I can do is move the pointer up a little bit, and that saves me adjusting anything. There's a little screw there that's holding the pointer onto the dial string, so if I loosen that off, so that's pretty good on 15 there. I'll just tighten that up. Check that. So that's good enough, I reckon. I've set the frequency meter on 600 again. I'll pull this up to 600, see where we go. So that's about it there. What have we got? It's not far enough out to be worried about. So what I'll do now is go to 1422 and change the frequency generator to that. I'll maximize the signal there using the antenna trimmer, and that'll be it. Now I've reset the generator to 1422. The pointer is now on 1422 on the dial here. Here's the adjusting screw, and that's sealed as well. They didn't want anyone playing with it, or they wouldn't be able to tell if somebody had played with it. Now I've got it on dummy load to keep the noise down. So just looking on that meter there for maximum deflection. I'm really not getting much out of this. Getting anything, it's a little bit there. Yeah, that's about it. It really hasn't moved at all. I'll reduce the signal from the generator a bit and we'll see if we can read something there. Yeah. So right about there, that's it. And guess what? I think it's pretty, it was maybe a bit further around. I say it's pretty close to where it was. I could have just skipped this whole thing and we would have been in exactly the same place. Okay, I've taken all the test gear off, I've put back the antenna, and we should be able to try it out. I've got it warmed up, and here it is here.
Jump around, and it makes it difficult to sort of latch on to exactly who they are.
Yeah, look, I think both of those things. I think there's a few things, there's a few reasons why.
So it seems to be working well. Now this is a very cheap speaker. I'm not going to use this speaker. I've got to find another one. This is a very cheap one, so it sounds pretty ordinary. So that's 4BH. That's very hard to get in this house, and much less on this bit of antenna I've got here. And so that's very sensitive, this radio. It's working very well. That's about all I can do to this chassis. I think it needs a little bit of a clean up. I just clean the grime off the chassis. It's very clean anyway. I need to source a new speaker. This one's not going to be good enough. But apart from that, I think pretty much ready to go back in the case when I do it. So I think I'll wrap up part 1 here. Part 2 should be pretty interesting. I'm going to have a look at the turntable and start working on the case. So I think that'll be a bit of fun. Now, this week's episode was very heavily into electronics, and I apologise if that's not what you're into. But the next episode should be a bit more hands-on and a bit more fun. So I hope you can join me in the next episode of my Stromberg Carlson radio adventure. If you've seen some of my earlier videos, you may remember this little fella. This was a Sanyo transistor that I didn't really fix up. I just cleaned it up and it worked, so I was happy to leave it like that. It worked alright for about a week or more, and then it started to not work and not work, and eventually it wouldn't work, and I traced it down to the speaker being blown, so the voice coil was open. I was unable to resuscitate the speaker, so I was left without one. I ended up getting a smaller one from the local electronic shops, and I put that in just as a temporary till I could get one of the correct size. But I met a gentleman at a radio club dinner in Canberra, and I've kept in touch with him, but I just, on the odd chance, I thought, I wonder if he's got one. He's into transistors more than me. So he said, no worries, and sent me one up. Didn't charge me postage, wouldn't take postage. So I've got the speaker today, and there it is. So it's only a little fella, but it's the right size. The one that's in there now is too small, so it sounds tinny. The air's getting around behind the speaker and negating the bass. My intention was to use this to listen to the football, because all the football's been cancelled, so this whole operation's pretty much moot. After I put this out on YouTube, I got a few comments saying, well, I should have changed the capacitors that are feeding the output into the speaker. Maybe some DC's getting through. So that makes perfect sense to me. So I've bought a whole bunch of capacitors, and I'm going to change the ones I can change now, and specifically the one that may cause the issue. These capacitors here are the ones that are going to give me trouble as far as the speaker is concerned. They're in the amplifier stage, so I'm going to get rid of all those. Another one's tucked around there. There's the speaker I fitted in place of the broken one. Here's the new second-hand one, and you can see the difference in size there. Just before I change the capacitors, I thought I'll just put a multimeter on here and see if there's any DC voltage, and then when I change the capacitors, see if it's still there. It says we've got 14.1 millivolts sitting on the speaker there in DC, so I don't know what it should be, or not sure if anything should be there. So I'm going to change the capacitors and then see if that rectifies any of that or takes it away. So that'll be interesting. Okay, I've changed all the capacitors, all the electrolytic capacitors. So we'll see if that makes any difference to our DC reading. So we had 14 milliamps. I'll just turn it on. What do we got? May have dropped 0.2 of a milliamp. That's about all. So that, I don't know if that test is valid or not. It may not be a way of testing it. And I'm happy with the way it works. I'm going to put my new speaker in and put it all back together. Alright, so that's all back together. I'll put his back on. Alright, I've got a signal in here, which is unusual. But
beautiful weather, I appreciate that, but this is the time.
So it's back. That's fantastic. I love this little thing. I don't know why. It's a piece of junk, but I just like it. I don't know.
Darby with PG South is expected to suffer a direct hit from Harold.
Well, that's AM. I haven't got an antenna on this. It's got a loop stick in there, so that's all that's using. Outside, I'm sure it'll work fine. Or out of here. So there it is, all done again. Let's hope it lasts a bit longer than 3 or 4 days. And many thanks to Ken for sending the speaker up, and he did it so nicely too. So I very much appreciate it. Thanks, mate. And when the footy comes back on, this radio will be on too.